One of the ways to make your films feel polished and professional is to be intentional about the framing. This refers to where objects are placed in the scene. An example of this that I liked in The Assurance is in the beginning of the hut scene. In the original version of the film, Tiani was overwhelmed with the responsibility of both preserving Cordelia and sending her on her very dangerous mission. And I wanted to represent this conflict visually. So I used a wide-angle lens and put Cordelia close to the camera and Tiani back in the corner. This framing makes it seem like Cordelia is an animal consuming Tiani, or I guess more accurately that Tiani was absolutely consumed with what to do about Cordelia. We'll talk more about balance and composition in the cinematography course, but where you put things in the frame determines how visual weight is distributed. Often the frame is divided into imaginary thirds. The subject is put on one side, and this creates a balanced composition. You can see this clearly in the opening shot of The Assurance. 2/3 of the frame is just emptiness, which has the same visual importance as the third of the frame that's filled with Cordelia, because people are the most important thing. Also, because in English we read left to right, putting her on the right side of the frame makes it feel like she's put in an imaginary corner, like she's at the end of the line. Now, if this shot were reversed, it wouldn't have that feeling. It would be like she has the whole world open to her. In this shot from Citizen Kane, the mother and father of a boy disagree about what to do with their son. As they argue, we see the child playing innocently in the background. The framing shows us very clearly that the boy and his innocence are in the middle of this war between parents. You also want to be aware of the way you're guiding the eye of the viewer. Our eyes jump to movement, areas of contrast, and to the brightest spots of an image. Take a look at this masterful example. This is a painting by Rembrandt that depicts a Bible story where Jesus was asleep on a boat in a storm. Our eye first goes to the left side of the image where we have the brightest tones. This area pops even more because most of the image around it is darker. And then our eyes are guided upwards by the lines of the mast and the ropes and this guy who's looking upwards. You know, eye lines are very powerful. We want to see what other people are looking at. And so our eyes drift upwards along this mast until it fades to darkness. At that point, it's just really not that interesting anymore. Now, that's the first place our eyes go. But as we scan the rest of the image, there's all this darkness everywhere. And in this dark area on the right, we see a subtle spot that sticks out because it's brighter, because our eyes are drawn to that contrast. And this is Jesus over here. And once we see him, we see all the others around him. Rembrandt makes him more powerful with all the things in the frame that point to him. The oar points to him, and the eye line of the oar guy points to him, and this guy and his arm, and his buddy's eye line. This guy is leaning over the boat, but the outline of his shoulder leads up Jesus' right shoulder. These wooden posts on the left create lines that would just about converge at Jesus' head. So when we see the whole picture, Rembrandt tells us a story with how he guides our eyes. He first says, wow, look at how crazy intense this storm is. Then notice how calm Jesus is about it, even though he's super important. And if Rembrandt can take us on a journey by using static lines and contrast, imagine what you can do with these principles when these elements are brought to life in video. In The Assurance, we guided the eye throughout this shot by using different lights. Initially, our eyes lock on Cordelia because of her magic ball, but then we start seeing these embers come up. And these catch our eyes because movement is another thing that attracts our attention. Then we see the bright eyes of the demon come up from the ground, and we fixate on him because he's looking towards us. As he's rising, he's kind of revealing himself. Once he's completely risen, there are explosions that guide our eyes to the edges of the frame. As our eyes pan wide left and wide right, it essentially adds space that this dude is taking up in the frame, making him feel even more powerful. In Vertigo, Alfred Hitchcock uses color contrast to guide our eyes in a busy restaurant. There are so many people in this room and so many things going on, but through the use of color, Hitchcock tells us exactly where to look. And not only that, but in this case, he also associated this character with the color green, which will come into play throughout the rest of the film. The frame is uniquely cinematic, and choosing what to omit from the frame can be as important as what you include in the frame. When you frame a shot so that you can't quite tell what's going on, this is called open framing. When you have a master shot or a wide shot where you can see everything, this is called closed framing. To me, those names seemed a little counterintuitive at first, but that's what they're called. In the original version of The Assurance, we cut from the hut scene to this close-up of the cart. Now, this close-up shot is open framing. We aren't exactly sure where we are or what's going on, and it makes an audience curious and creates an increased desire in the audience to get their bearings and figure out what's happening. An added benefit here is that for the rest of the scene, and even through the next scene, we have a special kind of relationship with that cart because of that open framing close-up. Viewers might ask themselves, why'd they show us that cart really close up? But then later, when the cart tips over and Cordelia is discovered, we realize the significant role that this cart plays in the story of the life of these characters. The takeaway here is that the decision to show something in the frame and how to show it is a huge part of cinematic storytelling.